Beautiful beaches. Southern Water turned down the chance to appear on this programme. But they did tell us that no pollution is acceptable and that the release of wastewater on this occasion was necessary to prevent flooding of homes and businesses. They say they've invested £10 million into the pumping station at Margate in the last decade, with another 5.5 coming by 2025. And they say they will be compensating the council and local businesses. Let's turn to our politicians. And of course, first, because it's your patch, to Craig Mackinlay. So we hear Southern Water blames a lightning strike. They apologise, they promise to compensate. Is that enough? So that's
but
good.
As Barry showed, there is still a lot of filth on that.
Yeah, and fair play to him. What a good man, going and picking it all up and showing it to us. You have been asking what measures Southern Water should have had in place to mitigate this act of God, this lightning strike. Are there things missing? What have you found out?
Well,
one answer to this is to say bring it. I mean, of course, you're going to find the 30 to 50 billion to buy these companies back. But there's also a question here about whether you can't just regulate better, whether this is a privatised or nationalised industry. Craig Mackinlay, your government is responsible for regulation. You're not just an observer. You're a Tory MP. Your government's been in power since 2010. When are you going to sort out the regulation of the water companies so this can't keep happening? And not everybody will, but the regulation needs to be better. The National Infrastructure Commission produced a report in 2019 on regulation. They said there's a culture of short-termism, and interestingly and presciently, they said the regulatory system must adapt to build resilience against increasingly frequent extreme weather. Your government's got to tackle regulation. Much indeed. We'll pick up on Craig's point about planning a little bit later on the show. But first, only 1 in 6 white pupils on free school meals goes to university. For poor black, African and Bangladeshi pupils, nearly 3 in every 5 do. It is a stark difference, highlighted by a group of MPs this week. They say poor white children have been failed by decades of neglect. They say one reason for the difference is that kids in London have seen their education improve in recent decades, while places like Kent, which are largely white, still have some of the biggest gaps in achievement between children who are disadvantaged and children who are not. To discuss this story, we're joined by Alan Brooks, who chairs the Kent Assembly. In just a moment. It is a bit rich, though, isn't it? Kent County Council writing to the government to say you need to do more for disadvantaged children. What did they do last year when those children were sitting the Kent test for a place at the illustrious grammar schools? Moved the date, nothing else. So let's bring to bear on this the selective system in Kent. We've got a county that has one of the biggest gaps in attainment between the advantaged children and the disadvantaged children. I cannot believe that the selective system doesn't have something to do with that. Let's bring the politicians back into the conversation. They've been listening on their respective video calls. Craig Mackinlay, you heard there Kent County Council is lobbying for more recovery money for precisely these kids, these working class kids who are struggling. Do you agree? And particularly on this issue of pupil premium money, £4 million missed because the government decided to count the kids entitled to pupil premium at a totally different time of year this year.
Well, we always...
OK, let's go back to Alan Brooks, the head teacher in the room. Everyone mind their manners. We've talked about lots of things in this report, and Craig and I have talked about some of the things that aren't in the report as well that may be relevant. One of the things I think is really interesting is we talk about schools, and we've got Vince there talking about Sure Start centres and education. What about parents? Where do parents fit into all of this? And how do you support the parents of the kids who aren't doing well to support them to do better? I want to know, because in the end, a child spends a lot of time with you in a school, but they spend even more time with their families, don't they?